Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. The European Union may be about to face a fait accompli in the form of a speculative Ukraine peace plan that, according to press reports, has been drafted by Russia and the US alone, with no input from Kyiv or Brussels. With top EU diplomats already saying they were not consulted on the plan, how can the European Union make sure that the interests of Ukraine and its allies are preserved? Joining us now is Kolesnyk, president of the MENA Research Center. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So political reports that most of the EU officials that they've spoken to are really critical of that plan. One of them said it's not a plan at all. The other one said that it's lopsided towards Russia, that it poses a danger to Europe as a whole. What is your take on that?
First of all, we can even read the Peskov's Putin spokesperson yesterday's comment about it, and he said that there were no consultations or plan whatsoever drafted by Russia and the United States. So I guess what we are talking about is some kind of a brainstorming. It's not a real proposition as of today, but it's a brainstorming and a few ideas outlined on the paper, and those ideas are quite conflicting, by the way, because from what I read right now, there is also a provision that NATO agrees not to station troops in Ukraine, but we know that, for instance, France and the United Kingdom are keen to commit some troops to station to Ukraine when the ceasefire or the peace agreement is signed between Russia and Ukraine. So, I mean, there are some conflicting provisions about it. Moreover, how can the United States, for example, discuss about the peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine without consulting us, the Europeans? Because, the Russo-Ukrainian war is the threat to Europe. It's a threat. It's a security threat to the European continent, and much less to the United States. So it is quite understandable that the European Union officials and European countries officials are not happy about it. And it is obvious from what I'm reading right now, this some kind of a plan, or if you want, ideas outlined on the paper, are quite disadvantageous to Ukraine and to European security.
Do you think that the authors of this plan, which for the time being, this is still speculation, it's not an official plan, but if it is, do you think the authors might have been counting on Europe not being able to make a unanimous decision? I mean, we do know that there are countries who are dissenters. We have Hungary and Slovakia, but we also cannot agree on the question of frozen Russian assets because of Belgium actually having reservations of its own. So do you think this is an attempt to exploit the lack of unity?
First of all, also it is, I guess, important to note here is that, as you have said, there is somehow not enough of unity, and Washington and Moscow understand as well, and they have seen that we as Europeans, we talk a lot about how we should be engaged in this process, and that the peace should be just, but at the same time we see that we are not making necessary efforts to help Ukraine. We have significantly decreased our efforts since the 2023 Ukrainian unlucky, I would say, or unsuccessful counteroffensive in southern Ukraine against the Russian troops. And if we are serious about being engaged into this process, and if we are serious about having our let's say red lines or our ideas and priorities to be respected in the future deal between Russia and Ukraine, peace deal or a ceasefire, we should be more serious about helping Ukraine.
Now, this plan actually, according to the version published by Axios at least, it seems to essentially make obligations on the part of the European Union without consulting the European Union, financial obligations. Let me read one provision there. Frozen funds will be used as follows. 100 billion in frozen Russian funds will be invested in US-led efforts to rebuild and invest in Ukraine. The US will receive 50% of the profits from this venture. Europe will add 100 billion US dollars to increase the amount of investment available for Ukraine's reconstruction. Frozen European funds will be unfrozen. Now, that appears to be imposing certain obligations on the EU without even asking if the EU actually accepts that.
Exactly, and there is even another provision that says that some parts of the Russian frozen assets should be transferred to some newly created American-Russian fund to be used for the investments into the Russian or Russian-American joint project. It is, for me, it is complete nonsense. But at the same time, we have seen that the Trump administration and his way to negotiate and to broker deals, it is his way. He's imposing the conditions. He's saying, okay, we will do this, we will do that, you will do this, you will do that. And then it is up to us to refuse and say, no, it will not happen. But at the same time, as I have said, to me, this document, I mean, those provisions that were published by Axios, and I also have them in front of my eyes, to me, it is some kind of a draft of ideas, and not everything should be included into the future ceasefire agreement or a peace plan.
Do you think there are any points which might be preserved and which might also be acceptable for Ukraine and for the European Union? Any positives?
Obviously, for example, when we talk about Ukraine's territorial concessions, I guess for Kyiv, and the official line of Kyiv is that it is a red line, that they will not recognize any territories of Russia. But at the same time, they may agree to recognize de facto Russian control over those territories, while those territories will be officially recognized as an integral part of Ukraine. So to me, it is a concession that could be acceptable for everybody, because we know that the Ukrainians, they do not control those territories, and they don't have forces to reestablish control over those territories. But at the same time, there is another provision that, in my opinion, cannot be accepted. It's about exclusion of Ukraine's NATO membership. And if we think that for Russia, it's one of the key priorities, because Russia wants to have the possibility to control Ukraine, and it was their plan from the very beginning, actually from the 90s, even after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And then keeping Ukraine out of NATO will by default mean that Russia will be able in a few years, or in 10 years, or in 15 years, to do another military aggression and to grab more territory from Ukraine. So to me, it's a provision that nobody could accept and could stomach.
Now, there are apparently security guarantees. They provide that it's going to be a comprehensive architecture for Europe as well, that Russia would actually have to enshrine in its legal system the principle of non-aggression against Ukraine. The big question, of course, is who would be able to determine that the Russians actually don't break this deal, like they did with the Budapest Memorandum, for example? If it was a new thing, some people might say, okay, let's go for it. But it was already tested and it failed.
Exactly. And for example, Russia recognized officially the Ukrainian territorial integrity in a number of agreements, including the 1997 agreement. But at the same time, Russia violated it. And we as an international community, we didn't manage to make Russia pay enough for this and to make Russia stop. So at the same time, in the future, for example, in 5 years or in 10 years, who will stop Russia? So that's a big question. And because there is also a provision about some kind of guarantees to Ukraine that even are better than the Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. But if those guarantees are better than Article 5 of Washington Treaty, so why not to propose the Article 5 to Ukraine?
So that's an interesting question.
To me, it is a communication, because in the reality, we understand that as of today, the real guarantee is Article 5 of the Washington Treaty.
Now, do you think that Russia would actually reject any such provisions if they said, if they thought that they are actually tantamount to NATO membership, without NATO membership? What do you think?
I think for Russia, there are two scenarios. One scenario is that Russians are not really interested in stopping the war because the initiative is on their side. They continue to bomb Ukraine. They continue to destroy Ukrainian electric grid. They continue to move forward, even though not so quick they wanted to, but they continue to move forward in eastern Ukraine. And Ukraine is on defensive, and had to retreat from certain localities and certain villages, etc., certain territories. Another scenario is that Russia may be interested in a short ceasefire to regroup and to recreate its forces and to consolidate the control over the already controlled Ukrainian territories. So both scenarios are okay for Russia, but at the same time, if they will be okay to accept the security guarantees, that's the question. But from the document, I mean, from the information that was published by Axios, we don't really see any details. And without those details, it is quite difficult to comment on this.
Denis Kolesnyk was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.